assuring to hear. Let's hope he is right. So we're looking at the sugya of Kotzer, and I think I said we were going to focus on two things. Let me just actually draw up the notes that I sent the group so I can focus on the right things. The first thing we're going to discuss was the definition of mafarik with dates. So we have a Gemara in which Rav Papa makes a statement, and he says, "Haiman de shoda pisa." Someone threw a klodver, the dikla, to a palm tree. V'osa tamri, and it knocked off dates. Chayv shtaim is chayv 2. Achas mishum toilesh, v'achas mishum mafarik. One because of toilesh and one because of mafarik. Toilesh we already discussed. Toilesh is either a tolda, a subcategory of Kotzer, or a fellow Av with Kotzer, and we discussed that. But either way, it's linked to the melachot of Kotzer. But then the Gemara also says that by knocking the date off the tree, you are chayiv mishum mafarik. So what is this what is this prohibition of mafarik? Which melacha is it? So here we have 4 or perhaps 5 approaches to the matter, and we are just like to try and go through them. There's really several sub-sugyas here that we need to look at. We're going to spend some time looking at what mafarik is. Then we're going to look at Rav Ashi's response, in which he says, "Lav ein derech tlisha b'kach ve'ein derech pirika b'kach." This isn't the way, and therefore one isn't chayiv. And then we're going to go off subject in a sense and look at Tosfos, who uses mafarik in the discussion around what mafarik is as a springboard to talk about cholev. And we're going to look at the different views around milking and what the prohibition of milking is. But for this share, our focus is only going to be on mafarik in the context of dates, which is really Rashi and Tosfos Divrei Maskil, the achas, the shorter Tosfos, the earlier Tosfos, rather than the later Tosfos, which he speaks at length about what cholev is. So Rashi, just starting off with Rashi tells us mafarik tolda the dosh. It's a tolda of dosh, of threshing. Why? Shemafarik tavua mishavalel. You dismantle. Lefarek means to break into pieces. You dismantle the tavua from its sheaves or its sheaves of corn. Loshem porik min hachamor, like unloading a donkey. And then he brings from Rabbi Levi and from Meshulam Gon that after mafarik tamarim and machbedos, dismantling the tamarim from the machbedos, from the clusters of dates within which they grow. That is the melacha of mafarik, which is a tolda of dosh. Did I discuss in this group the title Meshulam Gon? Did I discuss what that title comes from? No. So I'll just make an historical aside, because this is important to know. Why does Rashi refer to his Rebbe as Rabbi Meshulam Gon? Now, Rabbi Meshulam Gon was an Ashkenaz-based Rosh Yeshiva, and Rashi refers to him as Gon. He refers to his Rebbes in general as Gaonim. So if you read the academic literature, and unfortunately this has entered the Frum world also, and you say to people, who were the Gaonim and what title, when were they given the title? They will answer, these are the Rosh Yeshiva in Bavel. They were the only ones given the title of Gaon. And there are Rishonim that say this also. However, both the Rambam and Rashi ascribe the title of Gaonim also to those who were outside Bavel, who were teachers of Torah in that era. Rashi refers to his teachers here and on several occasions as Gaon. And the Rambam, when he talks about the era of Gaonim, say they were based primarily in Bavel, and there were also Gaonim in Safas and Ashkenaz and other such places. So the Gaonim, in the sense that the Rishonim, the primary Rishonim use it, as a title given even to those outside Bavel. And I mention this just because of one of the most fascinating mysteries in Jewish history. And I'll just mention it as an aside because it's something that everyone should know about in terms of the transmission of Torah. If you were a Jew alive in the year 900 and you had a Shiloh, well, if you were lucky enough to live in Bavel, you would ask the Shiloh of the Rosh Yeshiva in Bavel, the great academies in Bavel, and that would be that. If you lived elsewhere, so where were the Jewish populations? North Africa, Italy, South France, North France, Germany. What would you do? You would send a letter to the Gaonim in Bavel. with a sum of money, incidentally, because the communities around the world supported the great yeshivas in Bavel. 3 months later, the Gaonim would get the letter. 3 months after that, you would get your reply back. And the wonders of the global village, modern technology, within 6 months, you could get an answer to your shaila. And pretty much that was the state of the Jewish world. Some level of knowledge and Torah practice, but very little higher level learning without communicating directly with the Gaonim Bavel. This is the year 900. The year 1000, you find exceptionally confident and prominent Torah centers in North Africa, in Spain, in Italy, and in the Ashkenazi world of North France and Germany. And what happened in these 100 years is a mystery and remains a historical mystery to this day. It's completely and weirdly incomprehensible how that change happened. It'd be a bit like if I took a shot in time in the year 1900 and I saw that the main centers of Torah learning were in East Europe, in Lithuania, in Poland, in Hungary, and so on. And 100 years later, in the year 2000, I saw the main centers of Torah learning were in Israel and America. And I have no idea what happens in those 100 years. Let's say we lost for some historical reason those 100 years. And I just saw this incredible mystery. Very little Torah in East Europe now, a lot of Torah in Eretz Yisrael and America. 100 years before, very little Torah in Eretz Yisrael and America, and a lot of Torah in East Europe. A complete mystery and puzzle. If I didn't know what happened in the 100 years between. And here, to the best of our knowledge, nothing dramatic happened in those 100 years. Yeah, but the situation in Bavel decreased a bit economically, things got a little bit tougher. And in other areas of the world, North Africa, Ashkenaz, things got economically a bit better. Jewish population grew a bit in one, declined in another, but we don't know of any major catastrophe that would have caused this enormous swing to occur. But suddenly, the year 1000, all these centers I've mentioned have vibrant Torah centers, and this is the beginning of the divergence you get between minhagim, because previously you sent your shilas to Bavel, so everyone was getting an answer from the same central base. There were some differences in minhag of piyutim and local practice, but basically you were being centralized the whole time. Suddenly you had these different yeshivas and different Torah centers, and from that arose the beginning of the different minhagim. We know something of what triggered the change, and maybe the balance was tipped a little bit just by some of this element. Things got a bit poorer and a bit more persecution. It's very strange how this change occurred. However, what's interesting for our discussion is there's no Torah center more confident than that of Ashkenaz. 100 years earlier, the year 850, very little Torah. 900, very little Torah. 1,000 years later, 100 years later, in the year 1000, even a bit later, 950, it's the most confident Torah center in the world. It's producing works of unprecedented grandeur. Out of it comes Rashi and Tosfos, remarkable works, a running commentary on the whole Torah of enormous influence. And as we know, we don't need to speak about Rashi and Tosfos. And more than that, the scholars, the Talmidei Chachamim of that world, are confident to pick fights with the Gaonim. They'll argue with the Gaonim, they'll come up with their own pshatim. And sometimes they'll even say, we follow our pshatim because our Masorah is better or is as good as theirs. And they refer to their teachers with the title Gon, and this is what leads me to this discussion. Rashi refers to his Rebbe's Meshulam Gon. He's one of the Gaonim along with the other Gaonim. This Gon in this backwater of Northern Europe is being referred to with the same title as the leaders of the great centers of Torah in Bavel. So this is a remarkable change. No one knows quite what to make of this, other than the suggestion of Professor Chaim Soloveitchik, who we had the great privilege of. He visited us in there about 3 or 4 years ago, son of Rabbi Yoshe Soloveitchik, Rosh Yeshiva of YU, the great Rav Soloveitchik, and he is an incredible Talmud Chacham, and Chaim Soloveitchik, his son, is an incredible Talmud Chacham and a historian, and he has put forward a view that no one thinks is completely accurate, but I think every intelligent reader thinks there's some accuracy to, in which he's argued that there was some form of direct transmission of Torah and migration of Torah from Bavel to Ashkenaz, in which a cluster or group of scholars moved to Ashkenaz and took upon themselves, they viewed themselves as another yeshiva of Bavel. There was Surah and Pompatisa, the yeshivas in Bavel, and a third yeshiva, which perhaps already existed in Bavel or moved, or at least became yeshiva when it moved in a modified version when it moved to France and Germany, and they viewed themselves as equal rank, remarkably, to the Gaonim in Bavel, and as I said, even adopted the title of Gaon for their Rebbe. So it's one of the most remarkable events in history. And I mention this because this is one of the few occasions where Rashi mentions his teachers. Rashi doesn't mention his teachers much. In this short Rashi, he mentions 2 of his teachers, Rabbeinu Levi and Meshulam Gon. And this Meshulam Gon is a Rebbe of Rashi who lived he gives the title of Rosh Yeshiva Bavel to. I'll mention one other piece of evidence just because it's an interesting thing and it's worth thinking about. One of the most bizarre features of Rashi al HaTorah is that he translates words which are difficult to translate into Hebrew in Aramaic. Into Aramaic. He'll quote Targum and translate it into Aramaic. He'll also translate it into Laz, which is French, into his mother tongue. Now, even the most learned of people are less fluent in general in Aramaic than they are in Hebrew. So why are you translating from Hebrew into Aramaic? Even those who really master Gemara and so on, Targum is a less known language. You learn Targum as a second language. Why would you translate Hebrew into Aramaic in the Targum of Rashi? And a possible answer to this question is that they still were using Aramaic as a yeshivish tongue. It's a bit like 100 years now, or 70, 80 years after the destruction of the great yeshivas in Poland and in East Europe. In the world of yeshivas, it's certainly in the Haredi world and even in the Dati-Lomi world, certain Yiddish expressions have remained because they're convenient tools for talking and learning. And this will probably linger for many decades and centuries until it gets lost as the language of learning. And it would appear that Aramaic remains the yeshivish language, the language of learning in the yeshivas in Ashkenaz. Of course, Aramaic was the mother tongue spoken language in Bavel at the time. Arabic hasn't yet superseded it, although it was beginning to take over with the conquest of that region by the Arabs. And therefore, Aramaic remains the mother tongue of the learned Jews to some degree, even in the generation of Rashi, which is a century or more after this supposed transmission of Torah from Bavel to Ashkenaz took place. We also see them writing piyutim in Aramaic, which again is a strange thing. Why would you write a piyut in Aramaic? We have on Shavuos, we have two piyutim written in Ashkenaz in Aramaic. One is the less known Yitziv Korkan, and the other one is the better known Akdomus Midin. Both of them written in Aramaic. Why would you write poetry in Aramaic? Poetry is written to some degree for the masses. Poetry is written for everyone to join in shul. You read how people used to relate to piyutim. We don't relate to piyutim like that now, but they used to enjoy it. Part of the pleasure of Yom Tov was you all sang together moving verses. Many of them written in Lashon HaKodesh, but in Ashkenaz only some of them written in Aramaic. And again, seems to suggest that Aramaic was a little bit of a spoken tongue. Al Kol Ponim, just that you file this away if you're ever interested in the history of these matters, remember that you've seen a Rashi here in which he tells us the name of two of his teachers and refers to them as Gaon. So this is an interesting Rashi. What does Rashi say though? Rashi tells us that the melacha of shot or piece of knocking this date is mafarik, and mafarik means dosh, removing something from its surroundings. So Rashi says by extension, in the same way as taking a grain out of a sheaf or an ear of corn is mafarik, is dosh, similarly taking a date out of its clusters is dosh. I was not that familiar with how dates grow. I've seen them around in Israel, but if you see them around, you see they grow in these enormous, almost sacks of dates with an incredible number of clusters of dates, quite heavy, weighing several kilo. And when you take a date out of this, says Rashi, is mafarik. Now, there's a vast array of questions on Rashi, including conceptual ones. The first question is, if this is mafarik, then what about every time you take something out of a cluster, like a grape out of a bunch of grapes? Secondly, conceptually, this doesn't appear to be the same as mafarik, in which you remove something from its shell or its casing, which is inedible. So normally mafarik is you take something, there's something new coming into existence. So the av of a mafarik is when you take the rest of the straw away from the grain, you crack it, remove it break it open from its holder, which is inedible, and get the grain out from the inside. The tolda of mafarik, one of the toldas of mafarik is squeezing juice out of a fruit. At least then I'm creating something new. I'm taking the juice out of its environment, which is something very different. If you extend mafarik to chole, to milking, I'm taking the milk out of the udder, which is something very different. It's a living animal, and out of that I'm extracting milk. Over here, I'm simply removing one fruit from a cluster of fruits. Very original and different for Rashi to be saying it is dosh, a tolda of threshing. So this is a question, Rashi. Interestingly, most of the Rishonim do not ask these questions of Rashi because they quote Rashi differently to the way we have him in front of us. And here I reference you to Tosfos, Va'achas Mishum Mafarik, the short Tosfos. He says, Ein nira l'ri k'moshe Mafarish Rashi. The Reed doesn't agree with Rashi, who explains that Mafarik ha'ilon mimasor manaperes sh'olov, that you are unloading the tree from its weight, its burden, which are the fruits which are on it. And this isn't really merely Tosfos. This is how all the Rishonim quote Rashi. I think I gave you on the handout sheets. I think we gave a little print of the Ramban. The Ramban says, Perish Rashi, She'afzeh mefarik tamarim in hadekel. You're detaching the tamarim from the palm tree. The next source I gave was the miyuchas l'ran. This is, I should translate that term. This is the source printed as the Chidushei Haran, but we now know it was not the Ran himself. It was not Rabbeinu Nissim. It was someone else, and therefore we now call it the miyuchas l'ran, the source ascribed to the Ran. It's a prominent Rishon, whoever exactly it was, and he said, Perish Rashi, Zorak Pisas Regovim, you threw clods of earth, the decal at the palm tree, Vihishar Tamorim in a decal, and he removed the Tamorim from the decal. So there seems to be a significant body of Rishonim who quote Rashi not the way that we have Rashi, but quote Rashi as saying that the removal of the fruit from the palm tree is the mafarik that's going on over here. So here we come up now with our second explanation of what mafarik is. The first explanation is how Rashi is in front of us, which is removing the date from the cluster of dates, from the eshkol. The second explanation of the Rishonim is quoted in the name of Rashi, which is removing the date from the tree. Now, on this, all the Rishonim ask, well, that's Kotzer, that's not mafarik. I mean, every Kotzer, every harvesting, you remove a fruit from its tree. So how can Rashi say that's mafarik, that's threshing, or told of dosh? Surely that's Kotzer. And pretty much that's what the Rishonim ask on. That's what the Rishonim all ask on Rashi. And if we look in Tosfos, Tosfos just says he doesn't think it's reasonable. But if we look in the Ramban, and or the Ran maybe says it's more clearly.
Rabbi Zobin, sorry.
Yeah.
How do you read into Rashi that he's saying you remove one date from the cluster of dates?
He says, "V'aseh mefarik hatamorim min hamachbedos." So the last words of Rashi. So the machbedot are the burdens, these heavy sacks of dates, and you remove the date from its sacks of dates, from its machbedot. That's what Rashi says. I thought you were going to ask me, how do you read the Rishonim into Rashi? And I don't know the answer to that question. I have two suggestions. Either they had a different Girsa, they had a different text of Rashi, or they understood that the beginning of Rashi is saying a subtly different pshat to the end of Rashi.
Aren't they saying that the machbedos is the ilon?
No, because a machbeda is not an ilon. A machbeda is an ilon is called an ilon or a decal. It's either a tree or a decal, which is a palm tree. A machbeda is the word that in Mishnaic Hebrew for the sacks, the heavy sacks of dates.
Right. No, I agree, but I'm saying on the Rishonim, seeing that machbedos equals tree. So if we're talking about being porik menachamor, mefarik, the unloading is essentially unloading a tree.
Okay, sorry. The translation of the words removing the tamarim from machbedos means you're removing it from the cluster. It's possible that the Rishonim are learning that the significance of that is not that you're separating the date from the cluster, but you're just pulling the date off the cluster, which is significant because you're removing it from the tree. The translation of the term removing the date from the machbeda is removing the date from the cluster. Either the simplest reading of Rashi means that declustering, removing the date from the cluster is mafarik. And how would Rashi answer the question that if you're removing the date from the tree that's Kotzer? Rashi would say, because two things are going on over here. I'm removing the date from the tree, which indeed you're right is Kotzer, but I'm also removing the date from the cluster, which is mafarik, is dosh. The Rishonim. Sorry.
Well, why should it be dosh? I can't picture anything there that you can describe as being dosh, because isn't dosh when something comes with some kind of an encasement that you don't eat, and in that way you're separating it?
Yes. So, okay, I was going to get to this later, but there is much discussion. If I'll come to this in a moment. But the simplest reading is the Rashi says this is dosh. It's surrounded by a cluster of dates. I now pick one date out of this cluster that's separating it from its environment around it. And Rashi's view, whether we like it or not, is that's dosh. The Rishonim don't quite understand Rashi like that, either because they had a different girsa, and they think that Rashi says you remove it from the tree, which is how they quote Rashi, or because they think that the first half of Rashi is subtly different to the second half of Rashi. And in the first half of Rashi, Rashi's saying, Mafarik Tavua Mishavalel, that you're just removing it, you're unloading it. But in the second Rashi, he says, Min HaMachbedas, the second word of Rashi is from the clusters. Or they think, even though Rashi says you're removing it from the cluster, nonetheless, the significance of that is that you're removing it from the tree, because after all, the cluster is attached to the tree, and therefore the relevant part of Rashi is you're removing it from the Ilon. So, Asher, if that's what you're saying, then yes, that would be a possible reading of Rashi. But I want to stress the translation of Rashi is you're removing the Tamarim from the Machbedas. You're removing it from the cluster. The significance of Rashi, the Rishonim say he seems to be removing it from the tree, but then that's very problematic, as they ask, because every picking then is every time you harvest, you're doing two melachos. That's ridiculous. So the answer to that would be what Rashi says. The melacha, Rashi never said the melacha is removing it from the tree. Rashi said the melacha is removing it from the achbeda. It may happen that you're doing both in one act. Indeed, that is the case. In that act, you're doing two things. You're removing the tamarim from the tree, which is the kotzer, or totlesh rather, and you're removing it from the cluster, which is the dosh, because you're removing it from the machbedas, in which case we understand why Rashi said this language of mafarik hatamarim min ha-machbedas. However, that leads us to difficulty, which Gary is saying, which is how on earth is this dosh? But at least we have a reading in what Rashi is saying.
Is it possible to link this to, I have a problem with understanding what atar means, because Rashi explains it as lahashir, which is to shed. So I wonder whether that helps the idea that when you're shedding something, you're not actually removing it. In a sense, it's an action which occurs passively. It is shed from something. So I wonder whether this translation, because it's an interesting translation that Rashi gives to atar, because atar doesn't mean lahashir, if you see what I mean.
Right. So there's several points over here in this important point you're raising, Paul. So first is translation. So Rashi here is translating his shiur as causative, to the best of my knowledge. It's you're causing it to be shed. Number one, though you're right that this word shed is an interesting word. Secondly, the grammar of the translation seems to be the classic Aramaic switch between a tof and a shin, like talas and shalosh and many other examples of that. And therefore atar is linked to the his shiur, the tof becomes the shin, and therefore it's causative of the shiur, of shedding it. However, it is an unusual word to use, and the lomdus of what's significant in doing this, and actually primary to that, or earlier than that, what is the mechanism of what's happening over here remains unclear at this point, and we will get to this. So what we know is I throw the clod of earth, but everything else that follows is a little unclear. Am I knocking the whole machbeder off, or am I knocking one fruit off? And at which point does the mafarik happen? Does it happen directly when it's hit by the clod, or does it happen when it lands on the ground? All that remains a little unclear at this point, and we're going to have to work that out. And depending on how we conceptualize what's going on, that will affect what's the chiddush halacha of this sugya. So just to summarize what we've said so far, we have a Rashi who seems to say that what's happening is the removal, doesn't not seem to say, it's explicit, despite Asher's question. It's explicit that what happens is the removal of the fruit from the machbeda, from the bunch, which in simplest translation means Rashi is telling us that removal of a fruit from a cluster is dosh. Uncomfortable, problematic, as raised by Gary, very much so, but that's what Rashi says. The Rishonim understand that Rashi either says or means, depending if they translate it differently, have a different gear, so whatever it may be, that the removal of the fruit from the tree is what's dosh, at which point they say, well, then that's every kotzer. What on earth is going on over here? So these are the first two mahalchim in how to read the Gemara and translate it. I just wanted to use the time available to us just to discuss the other readings of the Gemara, and the next time we'll try and understand in depth what's going on over here. Tosfos says that the dosh going on over here, brings the name of Rabbeinu Shmuel, the Rashbam presumably, is that you are removing the klippa, the shell, the outer shell or layer that's on the dates, and that's the dosh. Now, in halacha, this is the easiest explanation. Dehusking something is dosh. I get that. The physics of this is a little difficult. How does throwing the clod of earth dehusk it? It takes great precision and thought and force. I can understand how throwing something knocks tomorrow off the tree, but how does it dehusk it is a little bit harder. And the biology of it is also difficult. And to the best of my ability to Google, I could not work out what the biology of this husk of the date is. It would appear, and there may be references this, that at an earlier stage, when the date isn't ripe, it has an outer, sort of the skin is quite tough, and the inside is a little bit more edible. It's fruitier and sweeter, and therefore dehusking is perhaps relevant. Once it becomes riper, I mean, we know that we eat dates and the skin is perfectly edible. It's maybe a little dry sometimes. We normally know dry dates, unfortunately, but if you get fresh dates also, their skin is edible, and it doesn't seem that there's a dosh there. So maybe Tosfos is talking about the earlier stage in the date,
I've definitely
in
seen
the date process. I don't know.
I've definitely seen dates with an outer casing on them, which is, I mean, technically it's not tasty at all.
Yeah.
And you get to the inner sweet date by taking off this external husk. That's, I mean, I've seen those regularly in Israel.
No, I also have, but these are the less ripe dates, as far as I can understand. From what I can see, that husk that you're seeing is the same as the skin that we're used to seeing in ripe dates. It just hasn't yet softened.
If you like, I can put it on the screen.
Sorry?
If you like, I can put it on the screen.
We're running out of time, so I would like to see, maybe you can place it on after we get to past, because I would like to see it, but I just want to not keep everyone here beyond the time if we run out of time. So I'm just not sure that a skin around a date exists. We see that every time we have a date. Why that qualifies as a husk of inedibility, I don't know. When a date is less ripe, it's, as you said, it's less edible, but it's edible. I mean, it's just less tasty. When it becomes riper, it becomes completely edible, and we all eat our dates like that. So why that should qualify as dosh in halacha, I don't really understand. And the Rishonim already questioned this mahalach. But this is the third mahalach in dosh, which is removing the skin. Just so that we don't run out of time, because I would like to see the diagram of this, Gary, if you're happy to share this. I'll just quickly run through the other explanations. And here again, I'm looking at the handout which I've got up on my screen, which I gave out. The Ramban says, when they fall to the ground from the force of the clod, so Ramban says it is the dismantling of the tmorim from the machbedas, from the bundle, but not because of Kotzer, but not because removing it from the tree, but because removing it from the bundle. Which incidentally, again, suggests to me that he had a different gears in Rashi. Because if he understood that it's possible to say the melachot is machbedas, then why didn't he just learn that in Rashi also? Either way, this is another explanation, that removal of the date from the bundle, like Rashi, but when it falls to the ground as opposed to it being directly knocked off by the clod. And this is how the Ramban and the Run understand it. Then we have a possible final explanation, which is Rabbeinu Yerucham, who I haven't given you in the source sheet, but he's brought by the Posek in Halacha, who says that the mafarik is nothing to do with the date at all, but it's to do with detaching the clod from the ground and crumbling a bit of earth away from the ground. And he learns mafarik is a tolda of toichen, of grinding. And we're not going to go into Rabbeinu Yerucham's view. So this is a summary of the melachos as understood by the Rishonim. What we're going to look at next time is both those mahalchim. I don't really have more to say on Tosfos. In halacha, Tosfos is clear. This is classic dosh, removing a husk. I just don't understand the biology of it, of exactly what this husk is. In the other Rishonim, there's three other options: removing it from the tree, removing it from the bunch directly by knocking it with a clod, or removing it from the bunch by throwing it to the ground and it being removed from the eshkol. So in terms of what I wanted to say as an introduction to the sugya, I'll stop there. Gary, I'd like to see your diagram if you manage to find something online.
Well, to be perfectly honest, the diagram only reinforces what you're saying. It doesn't solve it, because are you able to see these pictures?
We've got text rather than pictures.
Yeah.
Right. So on Wikipedia, I can only imagine what he's referring to as the husk is this outer thing here, which, as you said, is very firmly...
It's not on the screen, Gary.
It's not on the screen, sorry.
Got Wikipedia text at the moment.
I've got it on the screen. I'm seeing it on the screen.
Oh, okay.
It could be you need to expand your window.
Story of my life.
Okay.
So
Right.
if we're looking at this bottom right one,
Yeah.
then the covering I can only guess is this, and I think it reinforces what you're saying. It will be so tightly bonded to the date, couldn't see how throwing a piece of earth at it would break it off.
Yeah.
So it's not stolen. And then if we look at this upper one here, of what looks like when dates are on a tree.
Yeah, these are the machpedos, yes. These are the
Right,
machpedos
so
of the eshkol.
is the machpeda the entire cluster?
Yes.
Is actually, but the individual one is actually on the outside. It's not embedded in the cluster.
No.
And it's
No.
very difficult to imagine how throwing a piece of earth, or in the next view down on the sheet you gave us, a stone, would cut either over here or would cut over here. It's just very difficult to imagine it.
I think you can see on the picture of the trees that those dates there, that is a husk on the date there. And if you, because look, the colouring is not this look of a sweet date.
Paul, the biological reality is that this husk that you're referring to is simply the skin that we get when we get dates, which hasn't yet softened completely and hasn't yet ripened completely.
I know. I've seen that you crack. I've had dates where you crack off this husk and you get to the sweet date underneath.
As far as I know, that's only when it's unripe.
But I'm eating a ripe date underneath that. Anyway,
I believe that the outside hasn't yet ripened, but you know what? Let's Google this after the share and see if we can reach some conclusion.
Maybe there are
I claim no expertise in dates.
There could be different. There could, of course, be different types of dates.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you very much, everyone. And if anyone is able to Google and get some clear research as to what this Tosis's explanation is, I'd be very interested.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a good day, everyone.
Sure, yeah. Thank you very much. Good.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, have a good day.